I think the citizen panel gave confidence to council that a representative group of citizens armed with the right information would come to the same conclusion that our administration is recommending, which is that we should take action, that there's an upside in the action, and that that upside is not all about greenhouse gases, which are important as an issue unto themselves, but that there's other benefits here around cost saving for citizens and businesses, as well as improvements in air quality that everybody can get behind, regardless of their position on anthropogenic carbon.
I think they've really got some strong messages and some really tangible messages they can use, and tangible advice. So I think that'll be a really important stage, and then I'm hopeful that it'll also go through to City Council and go through along with the administration's report, and that it'll be taken seriously at that level as well.
Looking back, it was quite the journey. Started with a phone call, a random phone call, and sort of culminated today, over 2 years later, in the vote to endorse a significant plan for energy transition for the City of Edmonton. So, as I say, it's some pride and a sense of accomplishment.
I believe without the citizens panel, it would never have gotten passed, because there was a lot of issues, and I think with the fact that it went through a citizens panel and the citizens agreed with it, and how high the number was, that the councillors kind of were put into a corner where they couldn't say no.
Well, I think the panel's influence was quite profound in the end, because I think it did give everybody comfort that we were not out of line with what a group of citizens of this city coming together and deliberating we're going to come to in terms of, you know, their understanding, their decision, and their beliefs about how we should move forward as a city. Because I mean, ultimately, we don't get there unless everybody's on board. I think it was reassuring to know that what we suspected was there in terms of public support was actually there, and to be able to test that, and to be able to know that if people really have a chance to look at this and weigh the options and understand that there's trade-offs, that these are the answers that they came up with.
The actual recommendations of the Citizens Panel report did come into play in developing the strategy. There were some great pieces of advice that we packaged as strategic actions. It's sort of the foundational logic of the entire strategy. But not everybody is passionate about climate change, but they're still supportive of energy transition.
The city obviously hears a lot from industry and from business and from developers directly, so it was nice for us to have our voice heard and to be part of that equation in terms of making this very significant decision.
I think there's two things that I would have done differently. One is had a much more rigorous and creative communications or strategy with the larger public, or involve the larger public somehow in connection with the citizen panel, either through social media, through other forums in which they could observe, weigh in, be connected to the citizen panel. So connecting the larger community. I think if we asked the broad public, are they aware of a citizens panel, what that is, they may not have a good response to that. So I think trying to bring more people into the panel. And the other one I think is, if we had known that the decision, coming to a decision would take 2.5 years, I think I would have thought very differently about how we approached keeping people involved.
The panel was strong in the way that it took a representative group of citizens and let them have their own deliberation, but I'm curious about what might have been gained if we'd woven that together much more rigorously with civil society organizations, with the business communities, and given the citizens a sense of who was doing what out in the community, and also given those different sectors a sense of connection to and ownership of the panel. So I think it was a powerful process, it was an influential process, but it was also somewhat isolated from other conversations and other places of conversation.
As a first-hand observer, I can see that the process had real meaning. And then subsequently, to remain in contact with some of the panelists who've taken it upon themselves to advocate and to be leaders in the community on this issue, that's been one of the most inspiring dividends. That, and I think giving our city administration the confidence to know that citizens, given the opportunity to debate and given the opportunity to be informed about this issue, would come to a strong consensus that our council reached today.
Because I think what is so powerful about the Citizens Panel is it allows people to hear from each other, it allows people to get really well informed and then respond. But getting that happening over a longer period of time, making sure that, that information now gets out to the larger group of citizens who were not able to sit in the room and hear that discussion and hear from each other and get the information. I think that's the limitation of the citizens panel. I think you know, how you now take that, I think it's a good stand-in for what would happen if we got any group of citizens together. I think it tells us what would happen if you could put an entire city through that process and let them hear from each other. They would all come out in the same place. I'm absolutely confident of that. But the real challenge now is, and its limitation, is how to make sure that the whole city can go through that process, and that's a much harder task.
I would like to see more processes where citizens are involved in a deliberation, make recommendations, and are kept formally and explicitly involved in policy development and implementation. I think it is a waste of the citizens' capacity and a break between citizen voice and policy development when the panels are disbanded and administration and council carry the work forward. So I'd like to see some innovation around how citizens can be convened over much longer periods of time to do their work alongside administration and council.
I think the resilience of the panelists to remain involved, remain champions of the strategy that they support as citizens, I think that's the thing that's been inspiring and surprising the most. So I think it's a valuable process.
Feeling like citizens have your back as a policymaker, and then vice versa, I think is pretty important.